Dawn Levine here, and today we're going to talk about self-guided exploration versus tours with tour guides. We just recently did a 3-week trip in Greece and Italy, and we did a little bit of tour guides and a little bit of self-directed exploration. And so I've got some perspectives on that I'm going to share with you. So first of all, don't be afraid to just go off on your own. You don't have to have a tour guide for everything. There are some things that really lend themselves to a tour guide, and you won't get as much out of them if you don't have a tour guide of some sort. And there are other things where a tour guide is just not necessarily very helpful. So, if you were going to a place, like here's an example. We had a tour guide in Rome at the Vatican. The Vatican is huge, massive. We went to the Vatican museums and we had our private tour guide while we were going through the museums, and they're just so massive. We would have barely scratched the surface if we had just spent the same amount of time there on our own. We would have seen a little bit of it, probably very in depth, but we would have missed a lot of the highlights in the other sections. So having a tour guide there to show us the highlights and the most important things was very, very helpful. He was so familiar with everything that he knew how to pace us to cover all of the ground that we wanted to see. So that can be super, super helpful if it's a very large site and you would just wander aimlessly because you've never been there before. Then a tour guide is money well spent. So we opted for a completely private guide. It was just our guide and the 4 of us, and that gave us the freedom to move at a pace that was comfortable for us. And we didn't have to cater to the lowest common denominator in a group of 30. I don't really like large tour groups because even when you've got the earpiece where you're hearing the guide, it's still very difficult. It's hard to get the earpiece to stay where it belongs. You can hear what the guide is saying, but there's so many people that you can't see what they're talking about because there's just so many people between you and whatever it is. So I'm not a big fan of the big tours. I guess for some things that might work. Maybe that would be perfectly fine in the Colosseum, for example. It's such a big place. Even standing around with 30 people, you can still see all of the things that they're talking about. So those are places where, the history doesn't just, at the Colosseum, for example, it's a place where the history doesn't just spring out of the walls, ready for your consumption by just looking. So that's a place where having someone share the history with you is going to be helpful. Now, it could be an audio tour that you've got recorded, or it could be a live human being, but you're going to want a tour of some sort for a site like that because you're not just walking around trying to look at it. You want to know what you're looking at. You need somebody to explain it to you. So there are places that really lend themselves to tour guides. And then there are other places where having a tour guide, it's not really that helpful. Like, in Venice, just wandering up and down the lanes and over the canals, just looking at things is enough to really get a rich experience. Sometimes the site, just seeing it is kind of the point. So Venice is so beautiful that there are lots of things that you can do there without a tour guide, and you get a full, rich experience. Now, I'm not saying that you don't want any tour guides in Venice. If you go around and you do your walkabout and you're enjoying the sights, and that's fine. Then maybe you also want to do a walking tour with a tour guide or an audio tour of a particular area. So there's a place for that as well. But there are lots of things that you can do without a tour guide. We walked all over Bolzano, for example, and we walked through the market and we walked around the shops and we looked at all the paintings on the sides of the buildings. And we did that fine without a tour guide. Now, if we had had a tour guide, we would have had all that with an extra layer on top of it. But sometimes you just want to relax and you just want to freewheel it. I don't like everything too structured. I want some downtime. I don't necessarily want a timed agenda for my entire day. So usually how I do things is I'll have one regimented tour guide kind of thing per day, and then the other half of the day is either in the AM or the PM. And then the other half of the day is something that's less structured and more freewheeling and spontaneous. Walking around Venice, I might be walking down this street and see something cute down this alley, and I want to just take a right and walk down that way instead of following a tour guide and listening to their agenda. So I think there's a place for both. For me, there is a place for both things. And I like a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one. I don't want all this and I don't want all that. On days where we had no scheduled activities and no tour guides, sometimes you just felt like you missed things. I didn't get to see, we had a scheduled tour of the Pantheon, and then something happened and we were delayed and we missed the whole dang thing. And you can't go in without a ticket, a time ticket. So we didn't get to see the Pantheon. Some sites you can't see without really some sort of tour. So that's something to consider as well. But that day we didn't really have anything scheduled because we missed the one scheduled thing we had, and we just kind of wandered around all day, and it was just, we floundered a little bit and missed some things. So having a handler with a specific time to get you where you need to go on time so you can see all the things can be important. A tour guide can be really important if you don't have a lot of time and you want to make sure you don't miss anything. They will keep you on track. So I think there's a place for both, definitely in my world, probably in yours too. But don't feel like you have to take a tour all day long just because you don't have the skill to do it on your own. You can totally do some of these things on your own and just allow yourself some time to relax and take it easy. And just wander around and see where your feet take you. You never know when there's going to be something absolutely gorgeous or unexpected and wonderful right around the corner. So definitely keep that in mind. I hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll know when we do something new. Ciao.